A very warm welcome from all of us here on the Pirates Ahoy server. We are really excited to have you today, or actually tonight, depending on where you live. And we are really looking forward to hearing from your game, where we are always seeing such awesome screenshots from, and now we can finally answer and hear about all of the greatest and latest news in regards to the game. So I would like to invite you to start with a short introduction of yourself and also of the game, and then afterwards, I would say we're going to be answering questions of the audience.
Awesome. No, of course, that sounds great. So yeah, thank you first of all for having me, and it's great to be here. I think just sticking together as pirate slash maritime history enthusiasts on Discord is a great idea. So let's do more of these. But yeah, I'm Tyler. I'm the project lead of Ahoy. Ahoy.gg is our website. The game is a bit of a monolith or a mammoth undertaking. It's the attempt to digitize the 18th century Caribbean. And that kind of takes many forms. Primarily, it's obviously creating a really engaging sort of naval combat and sailing experience. That's the primary sort of gameplay intent. But we also want to really sort of highlight the history of the Caribbean and the life of people both at sea and on land during this time. The game is set around 1770 to 1785, depending on sort of what question you're asking. We change the date depending on whether we're talking about technology, fashion, or politics. But yeah, ultimately the game is an intention to recreate that time in history digitally for you guys to explore and conquer the seas and the ports and the hearts of the people there.
So, what was your motivation to start the game or to start development?
Yeah, so that goes back a while. Both myself and my brother actually have spoken about the concept of Ahoy for probably the best part of 15 years. I've been saying that for about 2 years now, so maybe I need to update that number to about 15, 16, 17 years. But anyway, yeah, it's been a dream. We've always wanted to play this game. We kind of grew up together playing Pirates of the Burning Sea, a bit of Voyage Century Online, a little bit of Sydney's Pirates, and all of the other games in between. We also played a lot of things like World of Warcraft, and in more recent years, I've had a brief sort of love affair with Star Citizen and a few others. So the inspiration behind the project is essentially combining all of those games into one amalgamation, one behemoth of a game. Just much more than we could probably ever achieve realistically at the moment. But the intention is to go big or go home, really. The project started officially in 2021, about February time. That was obviously just during the pandemic and the lockdowns and all of that stuff. In the UK, I was actually sort of told to work from home around that time, a little bit before, and I had a lot of extra time. I wasn't traveling to and from work, and yeah, I just felt that if I was going to make a game, now is the time to do it. We're stuck at home anyway, got loads of extra time, can't go out. Let's do it. And I went through a number of different game ideas. I've got a bucket list of games I'd love to make in my lifetime. And many of them are less complicated than Ahoy, less ambitious. But ultimately, over the course of sort of the first few months of lockdown, I experimented with different project ideas, different concepts, and about a few weeks into each one, I was like, yeah, this is interesting. Can I see myself working on this for the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever it might be? And the answer kept coming back no, basically. I kept putting off Ahoy because it seemed like such an ambitious undertaking. But eventually, I realized, especially around the time there were some other games announced, we saw Sea of Thieves, we saw uh, Skull and Bones, and some others. Those games were announced, released, and they didn't really answer the need that I had and my brother had for this game. And so, yeah, 2021, we set up the project. That was the first message in Discord, in our Ahoy Discord. Um, Back then, it was just testing various different areas of the project and seeing what I could do myself. But over the sort of past, what is it, 2 years, 3 years, however long that is, I can't count. And I don't care to either because it's sometimes quite scary looking back. But over that period of time, yeah, we've grown to a team size of sort of 15 to 20 people now. We're all volunteer. Nobody's making any money out of the project. But we're very, very lucky to have a really supporting community who support us through Patreon and a few other places as well, just with their presence, not just their wallet. And yeah, so it remains a volunteer effort for the time being, and obviously everyone's support really helps us maintain the costs and things like that of running a project like this. So that kind of brings us up to today. I'm quite happy to talk about where we're at and what's coming.
Yeah, so I think then this already leads into the next question that I would have is, what is the current state of the game? Is it in an alpha state, or are you nearing an alpha state? What can we imagine at the moment?
Sure. So we generally use the term pre-production at the moment. We're nearing the end of pre-production. Pre-production for us is an opportunity to explore very, very lightly all of the different areas of the project and understand our limitations as a team, understand the requirements of the team, and understand really the core design of the game from a very high level perspective. It's also a time to sort of develop the motives behind the project, the intention, behind historical accuracy and representing the different cultures and people of the Caribbean. All of those decisions came out of those years of pre-production. And pre-production ends and we move into production, which means that we're now moving towards our very first pre-alpha release. So in terms of how we deal with these sort of timelines and these titles of different release candidates, pre-production is coming to a close. Pre-alpha will be our very first exploration into sailing, which was a very recent change in priorities that we announced yesterday, actually. And then over the course of the following months and years, we'll be moving towards alpha, and then sailing and combat release, which will essentially be called Arena. And that's just a sort of a self-contained battle mode between players on ships. And then eventually, finally, we'll move towards the release of Ahoy, which is this sort of open world multiplayer shared experience.
Okay, thank you for that interesting answer. You said it's going to be a multiplayer open world maritime simulator, I would guess. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What does this mean? Can you play as a pirate, for example, or are you bound to different historic factions, for example?
Sure. So in terms of sort of the broad description of the project, if you can sort of picture this, you're always in first person. You're playing from the perspective of your character. So you're not controlling a ship. You're not controlling a nation. You're controlling just an individual sailor or a captain. And in terms of the sort of allegiances that you can have and the kind of experience that you can expect, it's very much a case of providing what is accurate and then some additional flexibility. So, for example, We've got the British, the Spanish, the French, the Americans, and the Dutch as playable nations. But we also have the option to play as independent peoples, which is essentially someone who doesn't subscribe to any of those 5 nations at all. How you choose to represent yourself outside of those nations is kind of up to you. You could, of course, go the piracy route. You could, of course, be a completely independent trader. You could try and represent yourself as someone from the Portuguese nation or some other European or worldwide nation through your own sort of choices in the way you customize and represent yourself. But fundamentally, there are the sort of 5 main nations and the 6th independent group. The 5 nations have a lot of diplomacy and systems in place to balance political sort of moves between the 5 nations, as well as the laws and policies of the ports that they control. Whereas the independents are not linked in any way to each other. So unless you create a group within that yourself, you are just independent people, hence the name. In terms of piracy, for us, piracy isn't a faction or a nation or a group. It's just an act. Anyone can commit piracy. Piracy it can be done by anyone, probably shouldn't be done by everyone, because obviously some nations will not appreciate you pirating their goods. And some nations won't appreciate you pirating other nations' goods. So it's really a balancing act of creating a sort of a bed of nations and intrigue and politics that the players can exist between and within. And piracy is just one part of that whole solution. So if you go and you see a ship that you want to take, by all means, give it a go. But you may have the full force of whichever empire that ship belongs to coming after you afterwards. And equally, obviously, if you are a pirate, or you want to specifically identify as a pirate, you can build a group. Go and capture a port under the flag of your own group of pirates, and that can be your identity. But it's ultimately, fundamentally, as a concept, piracy is as an act, not a group by itself.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you for that explanation. Another question I would have is in regards to the mechanics. What kind of mechanics can we expect from the game? You have already mentioned taking ships and goods. What else would there be?
Yeah, so ships is obviously the main focus. The mechanics of the game are focused around sailing and navigating and fighting within and with these ships. That is the primary focus of the game, really, is that you're going to be spending most of your time at sea. There's a lot of crew management involved. It's going to be a lot of focus on, in the eventual full release, there's a lot of focus on the loyalty of your crew and the narrative of the members of crew that you have. Crew members can be a mixture of players and AI. So sometimes, or NPCs, I guess, maybe be a more apt description these days. Your NPC crew would be narratively driven, so they can be hired and let go by the captain. They'll have their own sort of wants and desires, and they may end up becoming sort of key narrative moments in your own character's story. But they're also permadeath. Unlike players don't die and then restart from scratch. AI or NPC characters do. So if you have a crew of a couple hundred poor sailors, and you get into a fight with another ship, if they get taken down, they're gone. You've got to go and hire some new crew. And so those stories that you've had with them and their trials and tribulations disappear with them, really. In terms of the mechanics of sailing, that's something that we're actively working on now. It's our renewed focus on the project. I can talk about that a little bit more later on. But the actual sailing mechanics are, as you'd expect, you're controlling individual sails via individual ropes, and you're sharing that responsibility with the other players on the ship and the AI crew. So the NPC crew, rather, is going to follow your orders, or you hope that they will follow your orders. They might not have the intention to be that loyal to you, and as you command them and provide these orders for them to carry out, the intention is that obviously you and your other player crewmates are acting as officers on the ship. So you'll have one captain who is the owner, and a number of other players, between sort of anywhere from just yourself as a captain all the way up to 6, 7, 8 other players on your ship, depending on the size of ship. And it will go even further when we eventually go into larger ships as well. So you're controlling the guns, you're providing sort of aiming or gun laying orders to the gun crews. You're potentially on the guns yourself as a gun captain. You could be organizing the navigation of the ship and determining the direction that you should be headed. You could be requesting depth readings to find out whether you've come too close ashore. You can be managing the crew and the cargo. You can be at the helm, of course, and actually steering. And everything in between, really. It's an idea of creating the full experience of being at sea. And so, while some of the sort of more complicated features like climbing rigging and repairing damage and losing masts and that kind of stuff will come later, that's absolutely our intention, is to sort of represent all of that. I hope that answers the question. I ramble a lot, so.
No, all good. That's really helpful, because I can now finally understand a little bit better, especially what you just explained, that you are in first person mode and you are on the ship and you basically take up a position on the ship. So this would lead to my next question. Do you work yourself up the ladder of career, or how do you become a captain in the game?
So this is something that we're still sort of discovering. Obviously, it's important to note, I guess, and reiterate what I said before, in that there are several stages to this project. And so a lot of this sort of theory crafting that we're doing at the moment about the way the game will play is at the very eventual release. So some of this stuff won't be available in the arena and the early sailing examples, obviously, but this is the target we're setting for ourselves. So in terms of the I've just rambled and I've forgotten your question. That's great. Can you repeat? Sorry.
No, the question was, how do you get to be a captain? So
yes, of course.
Have you
Sorry. Yeah. So the path to captaincy and the narrative there is definitely part of the sort of progression that you take in Ahoy. You start out as a midshipman, fresh 18-year-old, a little bit old for historical sort of reality, but we have to age up our characters a little bit. Otherwise, we've got some awful scenes to depict. You start as an 18-year-old midshipman, or older. You can choose your age, and you're starting out. You're on someone else's ship to begin with. The very first sort of interaction in the full experience will be that you're actually on an AI controlled or an NPC controlled ship, and there will be a bit of sort of a narrative introduction to the game. By this point, you've already selected a nation that you belong to. Whether you choose to stay with that nation is up to you. You have to pick one of the 5 nations to begin with. The independent peoples option is something that you decide later on. The intention here is that you start as a midshipman and you're essentially headed straight for the Navy. That is what your family has been able to create for you as a start in this world. Whether you choose to commit to that or abandon your post is entirely up to you. You'll eventually, through a series of sort of introductory missions, get to your first exam. And then you're climbing up the ranks, really. You're through the exam process, which is really just a case of proving that you've picked up the core game mechanics. You're provided a promotion, and then at that point, it sort of opens up the doors to you. You can decide where you go from there. You can obviously stay in the Navy of the nation that you decided to join at the start. And eventually that will take you right up to captaincy and potentially beyond in future releases. And otherwise, if you decide to abandon your post, you can get a really horrible reputation hit with the nation that you decided to join in the first place. And they basically almost immediately become your sort of nemesis faction. So that's an important decision to make. that will fade over time. You don't have to keep them as your sort of nemesis faction forever. But as your reputation changes with the different other nations, you could then potentially join and defect to some other nation, or you could remain independent at that point. And so within that whole process, there are also options to move to the merchant navy or become just a regular civilian and just a civilian merchant. You can also be those things in the independent peoples group as well. So you can just do your own thing, really, and you're not limited necessarily in the path you take. Your character is the intention behind this is your character is a representation of all of the things you've decided to do, whether that's missions, narrative, storyline stuff, battles that you've been in that have been a bit famous amongst the community, taking ports and governing them even. All of that stuff is supposed to write a bit of a history of your character and your story as a player. And so we don't want to force players down one particular path. I don't want a situation, or it's certainly the rest of the team either, doesn't want a situation where you feel that you have to create multiple characters to experience everything. You should be able to experience some of everything, at least, on your one character. Whether you choose to is up to you. And so the progression is that kind of, climbing the ranks, whether it's becoming a better merchant and making more and more money, whether it's climbing up the ranks of the Navy and becoming a captain or an admiral later on, or joining as a privateer and being a somewhat just pirate, or potentially a unjust pirate. That's entirely your decision.
Okay, then I have got two more questions, and then I think we're going to switch to the attendees question, participants question. So my first question would be, how many ship types are there going to be in the first stage of the game?
Sure. So in terms of ships, at the moment, we've got 3 that are quote unquote art complete. That means that they are built, ready to implement, and ready to be set up for sailing. We will initially release our first sailing experience with 1 ship, which is HMS Speedy, which we're calling Veloz, which is the sort of one of the videos you're seeing in the background here. And eventually all 3 of those will end up in the playable experience. Eventually we're looking at getting really 1 ship per sort of size, I guess, or gun count. It's very difficult to sort of categorize ships, as we've found out. It's not really possible to very easily say that 1 ship, just because it's larger, is potentially different to another ship that's got less guns or more guns or whatever. So we're trying to sort of space out the ships that we include to provide a different kind of experience, a different number of players as a minimum recommended or maximum, and also just variety in terms of the nations that built those ships. The ships themselves could be built by any nation in history, but when it comes to Ahoy, a British ship, like HMS Speedy, can be built in Ahoy by any nation. So it loses its historical sort of origin, I guess, in Ahoy, and gets somewhat readjusted for the nation that is now creating that ship. But we're using these real ships as a basis for what we're creating.
Okay, and then my second question would be, what are your plans for the players to do on land? So are there activities like going to the tavern and playing gambling games, or going to the shipyard to repair the ships? What are your plans there?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the bare minimum for a player really is that they need to be able to arrive at a port and unload and load cargo. Whether or not that's for merchant purposes or just for your own management of your own resources, that is really the core purpose of a port, ultimately, is to go there and resupply. So ports, generally speaking, provide some other things to do while that takes place. So loading and unloading cargo is not instant. You may have a sort of more modern UI that shows two inventories, one for the warehouse and one for the ship. But you actually decide which things to transfer, and you're given a time estimate that will take, and it could be anything from a minute to 5 minutes to 10 minutes. And during that time, you are in the port, and you can keep yourself busy for as long as you need. Obviously, the time that the cargo takes to transfer will be much less than in reality. We can't have people sitting around for hours, but we want to give the impression with Ahoy that it's not a rush. People aren't in a rush to do things, and the sort of pace of the game is a lot slower, which is intentional. In terms of what you can keep yourself busy doing in port or on your ship while that's happening, games is a big part of that. You can go into a tavern and play a card game, and you'll be able to probably play a few different sort of historical card games, depending on what your preference is. You've got demanding satisfaction. If you want to go and find someone that you have a grievance with and line up with your pistols, with dueling pistols, and have a crack at them, that is more than within your capabilities. You can go around the shops in each port. There are many different shops for many different purposes. So you'll have pottery shops, you'll have food shops, clothing shops, cooperages, barrel makers. I'm forgetting all of the historically accurate names for them, but loads of different shops for loads of different purposes, and those are where you'll go to stock up. You'll go and get some new stuff for your ship and your crew and yourself. And then additionally, there's a sort of focus on social features. So games are fun, and obviously playing that with other players is good fun, but board games, I mean. But ultimately, the intention is to create a bit of a social hub in each of these ports. And some ports will be more social than others, I'm sure. Port Royal is the one that you're seeing in the background of these videos, is our first port we've explored, and that town has space for a tavern. It has an area for executions and punishment. It has a fort. It has gun salute batteries for ships coming in and out of port. Has a courthouse. It has many different things. So it's kind of a case of you can create your own entertainment to some degree. Obviously, you can just arrange an event. You could go to the church if you want to in the town, and perhaps someone can perform some music, or you can go in the tavern and just have a relaxing wait for your ship to unload and load. Or you can be a bit more aggressive with it, and maybe you're bringing back some prisoners to have hanged, or you've been called to court for some crime that you've committed. All of those different things, really, all of the above is kind of what you do in the ports, and the point of them is to give a reason, really, to travel. It's great to just have sailing around an open sea and sailing around islands, but these ports are living, breathing environments with interiors to buildings. You can walk around seamlessly. There's no loading screens between buildings or anything. So, it's just a case of creating that environment, talking to NPCs, starting new missions, finding historical figures like Horatio Nelson, and I don't know whether George Washington is in a port at this time, but maybe if he is, he might be there. And that's the kind of idea of it, really. It's just immersion. You can compare it to other games like I struggle to compare the game to things like Star Citizen and Red Dead Redemption because of their scale and their team size. We're only 20 people that are volunteering at the moment, but the intention is to sort of replicate that feeling of being in the world, and that world having sort of a reason for you to be there. So whatever you want to do is the point. And yes, I saw someone mention Sir John Duckworth, a very important character. Maybe we'll have to include him.
Okay, well, so thank you very much for answering all of my questions. Now, I think we are going to switch to the participants' question, and I've just scrolled a lot to the first question that I have seen. So the first question is from Karl Fatal, and he or she is asking, will there be a third-person view as well? I would love to have that option.
So I've got bad news. There won't be a third person option during gameplay. You can't play the game in third person during regular game, but you can view your character anytime, and you can view your ship as well. So the intention there is that you can inspect yourself and sort of see how you look and how you're presenting, and you can. There's sort of like a literal bird's eye view of your ship, a little frigate bird that flies around, and you can see your ship from above and around. And we do have a plans for a camera sort of screenshot video mode where you can capture sort of more cinematic angles and stuff. But fundamentally, we're creating a first-person experience for two reasons. One, immersion is really important to us, and I feel that third person can be immersive for sure, but we want people to sort of experience it from the eyes of the people that were there. And secondly, there's a few problems with third person in a game like this. One, if you're going inside ships and in the lower decks, a third person camera becomes almost impossible to make work. Our ships are very tight in terms of space. We're not making ships that are inflated in size compared to reality. They are very, very tight spaces in there. And so having a third person camera just doesn't cut it really in terms of that kind of area of gameplay. But also it creates potentially a difference in advantage for different players. So if one player is choosing to play in first person and has a much more restrictive view of the environment that they're in, the third person player could potentially look around corners or move the camera in a way that they could see through a wall or whatever else other problem it might be. So yes, unfortunately, no, we won't have third person, but you will be able to experience third person in out of combat scenarios for the purpose of sort of looking at yourself and your ship.
Okay, then Mirza Nelly asks, is it going to be an online game or is it also going to have a single player aspect?
No, absolutely. So this is a very common question, but it's an important one. At the moment, there's no plans for a single player. There are plans for you to be able to play the game solo, as in online but alone. But the whole goal of Ahoy really is to create a cooperative and competitive environment. So we want you to join your friends or other people, friends you make along the way, on ships and set sail and create those sort of memorable journeys with other people. Single player has its advantages, of course, and it would make some of our challenges a lot easier, such as the massive world that you've got to navigate and trying to figure out how to reduce the travel time from 300 hours down to about 5 hours across the map. Obviously, single player, you could just do a nice quick travel or speed up the time. But ultimately, we feel that single player isn't the focus. We recently did a community survey that ended just the other day. And we saw that there was a fair amount of people that would like some sort of solo or single player experience, but the vast majority of people really did want that shared experience. So that's where we're focused. There are so many great games out there that provide the single player experience. Many in this Discord, the other podcasts that you've already had, fantastic single player games. Obviously, you've got like Assassin's Creed Black Flag and all that kind of stuff. So we feel that there's a gap really in the market for a multiplayer experience like this, where there isn't necessarily the same gap for a single player one. But never say never. Who knows where the future might go and what it might hold for Capstan Games and the Hoy experience. We don't want to say never, but at the moment, no.
Okay, then I'm going to skip this question because it was basically answered now with the introduction of the game. He also asked how it compares to current Storm Engine games, but I think you make very clear with all that you've already talked about that this is a multiplayer game first and foremost, while the Storm Engine games are single player games, for example.
Yes. Yeah, so I guess just a very quick run off there. Yeah, it's first person, multiplayer. Unreal Engine 5 is the engine we're using. So yes, it's we're certainly taking inspiration from some of those games in narrative and other respects, but we are really kind of setting ourselves apart a fair amount, I think, as well.
And in regards to the system requirements, can you share something there? Is your Steam page up, for example, where you can take a look on
Yeah,
about the system requirements?
so we do have a Steam page. I will share that in the chat.
Yeah, perfect.
Multitasking. Yeah, that's our Steam page. We don't have minimum or recommended requirements right now. I would recommend, if you're concerned about the performance, to go and look at the requirements to run Unreal Engine 5 and other Unreal Engine 5 released games. There aren't that many yet. We are targeting a very cinematic, very modern, very high res, I guess, for lack of a better term, experience. Realism is absolutely the place we're going. So I would expect a relatively high requirement in terms of performance if you want the sort of the experience you're seeing in the background here in terms of visuals. But obviously, people can't afford the NASA supercomputers that we wish we had. So we need to make sure that the game runs for more than just those people. And that will be something that we work on over the course of development. It may start out that the performance requirements are quite high as we release the very first versions, and then it will slowly ramp down as we get more and more time to spend on optimizing and stability. We're hoping to lower that sort of access threshold for performance.
Okay, sounds great. Then Jay Fleming asks, will there be a definitive list of captains and crews and marines for each faction to access, where each player has access to see every other crew in the faction to potentially work together, build a crew?
That's an interesting idea. That's something we haven't thought of. There will be lists of players and non-player characters. I hadn't thought of the idea of having just an entire nation list. I think that might get abused by some people potentially if you just keep getting spammed because you're on that list. But maybe there's a way to avoid that, and if so, I think there's definitely some value in sort of encouraging collaboration that way. In terms of the way that you'll find and collaborate with other captains or other players, there are job boards in every port, so you can arrive at the port and check the job board out, and that's where you'll hire your NPC crew, all of the NPC crew that are available in that port based on the population and the availability in that location. You can hire there, but then obviously you've also got people looking for crews to join as well. So you've got players that can join you, and you'll get some information about their experience, whether or not they've got any commendations from other players for their good service or potentially bad service, and you can make an educated decision on who you invite. In terms of the wider sort of nation level organization and discovering players from across the nation that you're in, yeah, that's definitely an interesting idea. It's worth thinking about. I would say that the approach to that would be some sort of list or some sort of hierarchy, I guess, in terms of listing all of the governors makes a good amount of sense. Player governors of the ports of your nation. And then perhaps also you could have a system where players themselves can subscribe or sort of pledge allegiance would be a better phrase. Pledge allegiance to a particular port, calling that their home port, and maybe we list all of the players who call that port home in the port billboard. Thinking on the spot here, but yeah, that sounds like a cool idea.
Nice. So Stove Pipette asks, how will ship reputations work?
Was that reputation? Sorry.
Yeah, reputations.
Okay, so reputation is a ship and a player thing. Players have reputation based on their actions and their allegiances. Ship reputation is a slightly different concept. It's the same in the sense that the reputation is gathered through those events that the ship takes place or takes part in, but it's more a case of like a service history, I guess. Each ship has a name, and that sort of identity belongs solely to that ship. If your ship is lost or someone captures it, it sinks, or you give it to someone and sell it on, the ship history, the sort of service history, carries with it. You can, if you lose your ship, through capture or having it sunk, you can have one rebuilt, but the service history doesn't remain with you anymore. It's lost to whoever took it, whether that's a person or the sea. And the purpose behind that is that we're trying to encourage ships to be less throwaway. The idea here isn't that you just get the next largest ship you can possibly afford and maintain. It is about finding a ship that you can feel is almost a home, really. It's there are many other games where you can have homes in different locations, but the ship in this game is your home. You spend the majority of your time there. You've got your family portraits in your captain's room. Your crew members have got their belongings in their officer's room. Your crew and the stories that they have, and the people that you hire that could stay with you for potentially, as long as you keep them alive, months of playing the game. It's that's the kind of, I guess, the progression and the desire there is to maintain that ship identity. Losing a ship is going to be a hard thing to swallow, but if you get insurance with one of the reputable insurers, or another player can insure your ship as well, then yes, you can have it rebuilt. The only cost then is the time it takes to rebuild the ship. In the meantime, you can sail on your own other ships or other people's ships or your personal sort of boat. But yeah, service history. That's that's all the battles the ship took part in. Sorry, it's the ports that it's been to. It's the victories it's had. It's the list of crew members it's had on board over its history. And different elements of those parts of the service history will impact your own reputation gain and the respect that it receives. So, for example, if you've won a very, very important battle sometime in the history of the game, that ship is probably going to be fairly recognizable to people. That name that you've given that ship will carry some weight. And so keeping hold of that, it's not quite a flagship, but it's certainly, you wouldn't want the nation to lose its HMS Victory or whichever other, the Trinidad or whichever one it might be. You wouldn't want to lose that in real life, and that's kind of the intention, is that your ship becomes something that you really don't want to lose. I hope that answers that question. In terms of like gathering reputation and how that works, I would check the FAQ. We go over that fairly in depth, I believe, on the ahoy.gg FAQ. I could talk about it for hours, so I best not.
Okay, so then I'm going to move on with Malik's question. He has two questions for you. First one is, do you have an idea on how commanding AI will work?
Yep, absolutely. So there's a lot of things to consider with this. There's management of your crew, and there's providing commands. So management of your crew is really a case of making sure people are doing the jobs they're best at, ensuring that they're loyal, their morale is high, they're getting the correct rations, all that kind of stuff. And those all feed into each other, and sort of, if you've got low morale and low loyalty and high morale, that might not be good for you. If their loyalty is low, but they're willing to do stuff about it, then you could be in trouble. In terms of providing orders to your crew, that's really a case of, we'll have a number of systems in place. So for players, you can give players permissions to do certain tasks aboard the ship. There's a whole sort of permissions page in your ship's log that you can provide sort of priorities to. So you can say, this player's great at navigation, so let's put navigation as their top priority. And then let's put putting fires out on the ship are even higher than their top priority. As soon as that happens and there's a fire on board, then everyone gets the automatic command from you to go and put that fire out. And so you manage these through a sort of, if anyone's played RimWorld, actually, it's very similar to the system in the way you manage your survivors, or I can't remember the name of they give the survivors in that game. You give sort of a number value of the priority of each task, And so you can in your ship's log, in your ship's book, you can predetermine both in wartime and in peacetime what the priorities should be. And so as a captain, you don't have to necessarily actively give commands all the time, because that could get very time consuming and potentially frustrating. So there's a sort of level of automation, but then if you ever override that yourself as captain or as an officer that has permission to give orders, that order will go out. For AI getting orders, for players, they can choose to ignore it, and then you can have to dismiss them or give them a negative commendation. But for AI crew, they will generally follow your orders. They might not be great at the order you've given them, and that's down to you putting them in the right place. And their morale being low may slow them down or become less accurate in whatever they're doing. And their loyalty being low may make them less responsive to your commands. You may have to sort of make your command a bit more well known through potentially some punishment or some threat of punishment at least. But all of these balancing systems kind of play out into it's balancing it, right? You've got to balance your crew's morale all the time, the loyalty, the health that they have. If you're just pushing them constantly with orders, they're not going to get enough rest and recuperation to recover. So, yeah, in terms of actually providing the orders outside of the ship's log system, that's just a case of, obviously you can say in voice chat to your fellow player crew, just using voice chat and tell them what to do, and they can go and do that. Or you can use the command system that we'll have in place, which is kind of like a big wheel of command options, and it's multi-layered, so you can go and provide different sail configuration commands, or you can decide on to change the course of the ship by a certain number of degrees, and all of these different things, all from one big wheel that sort of opens up in the middle of your screen, kind of like a compass rose. That process then provides the orders out, and there's a certain number of moments you get to dismiss the order and cancel it. But once that's gone through, and you'll get a little sort of progress bar of the time remaining to cancel. Once that goes through, then those people that you've commanded will go off and do those things.
Okay, so this is, I think also it's now already answered the second question, but I'm going to ask you anyway, because maybe you have a little bit more detail in regards to that. So the question is, for example, do you give orders to adjust your yards, your sails, or when and how to fire your battery? What are the commands that you can give to the AI and the other players?
Yeah, absolutely, all of the above. It's controlling the yards, the sails, trimming. You can literally individually interact with individual belaying pins to control different lines. And you can command those things of the AI and player crew, but you can also do them yourself. And actually, there's a benefit of doing so. If you actually get involved in a lot of these tasks, you're going to build that loyalty, and you're going to show how it's done to the people around you. So it's more likely that nearby AI crew will be more accurate and more precise if, for example, you're the gun crew captain on one of the guns, and you're providing the gun laying and aiming values, and you're positioning the gun as you want, and you're timing the firing based on when the captain or the gun crew captain calls out to fire. If players are actively doing those tasks themselves, the nearby AI get a kind of, not necessarily a boost, but they don't fall behind you quite as much as they otherwise would. So the delay in response time, their morale is slightly boosted, their loyalty builds over time. And so you have a more ship-shape crew. There are other ways to make sure they're ship-shape, but yeah.
Okay. Then Rich asks, what would you say is the completion percentage until alpha release?
It's difficult to put a number to it. In some places, I would say we're 90% complete. In other places, I would say we're 10% complete. In terms of art and the representation of what you're seeing visually, that's pretty much there. There's more work we can do to improve things, but ultimately, we're 70 to 80% complete on the art side of things for ships and for sailing. For the technical sort of gameplay implementation, we're way less. As mentioned at the start of the call, the podcast. We're just leaving pre-production, and so a lot of that time is spent experimenting with systems, but never committing to them. Right? It's kind of, how would we do this? Let's try it very briefly in a very rough sense, and yeah, cool, that kind of works. Let's put that down as the route we're going to take when we do it properly. Meanwhile, obviously, the art team, who are absolutely fantastic, are working away, and they're making what is essentially the final look and feel of the game. But yeah, the gameplay is certainly behind the visuals right now. What you're seeing in the videos is very pretty pictures, but there's not much gameplay to back them up. That is why the decision yesterday that we announced to refocus our efforts. Originally, we were prioritizing releasing the Port Royal experience, which was our kind of very first view of the Port Royal port town, as a walking experience where people could just walk around and explore. But through the community survey and our own sort of internal priorities, we've decided that really getting to gameplay as soon as possible is the most important thing. And yeah, so that's it now. As of basically the end of this month, November, we're fully on sailing, and we're sort of aiming for early to middle next year for some kind of experience. Don't quote me on that. Anything can happen. As I said before, we're volunteers. People can get sick. People can not have time. Anything can happen. So yeah, it's sort of also dependent on funding as well. We're actively looking for external investment. And so as that investment may come through, whether from the sort of heritage and museum institution side or from the game industry side, it could be faster, or we could decide to take longer. If we've got money and we can do things to a higher level of quality, we may decide to delay things beyond that time.
In this regard, I would have a question, which is, what kind of sum are you talking about in regards to money? Are you trying to get investors to give you a couple of thousands or 10,000s of pounds, or are you looking at more?
Yeah, so it's a complicated one, this. Ultimately, at the moment, the most important thing for us is to maintain the costs of the project operation. As I said, everyone, including myself and the other sort of very long-term members of the team, are volunteer. So we're not making any money from this as of yet. That would be very nice, of course. It would be nice if we could ensure that we're financially stable ourselves. But ultimately, the main focus right now is for the costs of the project to be covered. We're incredibly lucky that our Patreon supporters are basically doing that right now. It's touch and go. Some months we're lower, some months we're higher in terms of the costs being covered. But we're talking there in the hundreds of pounds, or I guess euros as well. Not thousands. That thousands are not even floating around at all at the moment. In terms of the investment we're looking for, there's sort of 3 different stages or levels to that. Obviously, more people supporting us through Patreon, got to push that point, would be really nice, and it would really help us, and it would enable us to do more with that money. We can go and potentially get some freelance people in and do some jobs that we find more difficult ourselves. But outside of that, we're also open to sort of larger investors. We're talking with a different number of funds, both on the games industry side and the heritage and history side, in terms of supporting the project's vision for accuracy and the more educational aspect of what we're creating. And the numbers there are, if they feel uncomfortable to talk about, not because I'm not willing to share them, but they're so far and beyond the amounts that we're currently working with that it seems comical almost to talk about them. but it's in the tens and potentially hundreds of thousands eventually. And in reality, if you were to go and ship this game in any studio anywhere on the planet, you'd be looking at millions to make the final thing. So it's a long road. Financing a project like this is going to be step by step, and yeah, money is the one thing I wish we weren't beholden to. If we could do this for free, and everyone could be free of having to pay bills, then we'd probably do it still anyway.
Yeah, I'm asking because I have heard from another project how expensive it is to run the project as a full-time project with multiple employees that have to be paid and so on. So I was just interested in how you guys are doing it and what kind of funding you guys are looking for at the moment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, and one other
yes,
thing to mention on that is this is a very good piece of information for everyone to have. If you're running a business and you're paying someone a salary, the salary cost to the company is actually double what you're paying them because you've got all of the other benefits to provide and stuff like that. So, and developers, often are earning anything from anywhere from 30 to 60 and 100,000 a year for the really specialist people. And so, yeah, that's a lot of money if you think about even just the 20 of us that we've currently got. That's a lot of money.
yeah, I can vouch for that also. Here in Austria, you have 30% more to pay as an employer than what your employee gets, and he or she then has to pay again income tax from that amount that he or she gets.
Yeah.
So it's really expensive to have employees that get a salary.
And so that's it, right? We don't want to be volunteer. I would love more than anything, more than the game coming out, I would love for the people working on it to get paid for their time. That's really my personal priority, is to make sure the team is supported and happy and healthy. Right now, everyone's volunteering, and that's amazing. But yeah, it's absolutely our intention to make this far more financially viable going forward.
Okay, perfect. Then Dochst asks, does the game try to be as historically accurate as possible?
Yes, 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 absolutely. Um, there was a question actually similar to this in the survey that we recently held, which was something along the lines of, please don't focus on historical accuracy so much that the game isn't fun. And I don't want to dismiss those concerns, because that is a valid concern to have. But historical accuracy isn't mutually exclusive from fun. To us, that's our main challenge at Capstan Games, whether we're making Ahoy today or whether it's some medieval game in the future, or feudal Japan or something. It doesn't really matter where or when that we decide to make a historically accurate game. The ultimate goal is accuracy and enjoyment. So we're creating something that's fun but teaches you at the same time. One of the really important things, one of my sort of personal goals in the games industry, is that I feel that video games have an enormous potential to educate. If I think back to playing countless hours, probably entire months of my life spent playing, I don't even want to know if it's years, it probably is years of my life playing Total War and Crusader Kings and Age of Empires and those games. The amount of geography and history I've learned from those games over the years is the only reason I have the interest in the first place. And so we see Ahoy and future projects at Capstan as an opportunity to provide as true an account of history as we possibly can, with a few minor adjustments to that sort of historical accuracy, where it's either necessary for a modern audience or the content is just too sensitive to include as part of gameplay. And of course, we will take some creative liberty. I spoke before about the year that we have set the game in. For example, talking in terms of historical accuracy, the game is set technologically between 1770 and 1785. So any ships, gun, and sort of munitions technology that was available during that period is appropriate to include. But we're also having a separate date for fashion. So we only allow fashion that existed on or before 1780. Equally, in terms of which nations are playable and which nations have which ports and where historical characters might be located, is more flexible even still, because we want a bit more creativity on spreading that content around the world. And so there's some room for adjustment, but ultimately we want you to feel like you're going back in time. It's a time machine. I think the tagline actually on the website is, "We're making a time machine."
Okay. Then Dorst asked another question a couple of minutes later, which is what engine is the game made on? So I believe you already said it's made on UE5.
Yep,
Is that correct?
UE5, Unreal Engine 5. Yeah, we're keeping on the cutting edge of that as well. As new updates to Unreal Engine come out, we update almost immediately. So yeah, whatever available tools that you might see in those really awesome Unreal Engine Epic Games showcases they release, we will try and make use of them because it just makes our life a little bit easier. So yeah, I mean, in terms of features, for those that know, nanite, really high poly, high detailed meshes and models, some sort of meta-human-ish animation stuff for faces, that kind of thing. Yeah, the whole 9 yards really in terms of what they provide.
Okay. Then Alex the Fient asks, how will looting work for players?
Looting, that's an interesting one. So it depends what you mean by looting. Of course, you can loot pretty much anything in a ship once you've captured it. So, for example, while in a port, you can't just walk into some, like, it's not Oblivion or Skyrim, Elder Scrolls games, where you can just walk into anyone's house without permission, barge through the door, picklock it even, and then just nick their stuff. That's not the game we're making. It's not quite that level of loot anything, but you can absolutely go as you're navigating around the world on your ship, and if you engage in combat with another ship, everything that's in their cargo is available to you. With really only a couple of exceptions, we separate the player wealth from the ship's wealth. So the money the players have on them, they can put it in the ship, but if they don't, it won't be taken when you capture them, right? Those players and the wealth they're carrying on their person, within their own pocket, can't be taken. And the same with the gear as well. You can't just strip them of clothes and then they lose their hat or something like that. But for AI crew and the cargo on the ship, other nations' flags even. So if you want to steal the British ensign or the French ensign and then use that as a false flag later on, you absolutely can. In terms of transferring loot, there's a few ways to do that. Obviously, if you're going around yourself looting bodies or storage containers, you can pick those objects up and you can carry them for a little bit. Players don't actually have an inventory. It's a kind of an unusual thing, but you have an inventory enough to carry the costumes and sort of the clothing that you're wearing and the gear that you use, whether it's your pistols or your swords or whatever you might have. But you don't really carry barrels of coal or fish or something in your inventory. They can only exist on ships or in warehouses. So the cargo element, those sort of much heavier items, you would once you've captured a ship, you can go over to that ship's book, which is where the service history that you've just captured also exists. And in that ship's book, you can go to the cargo management page and essentially decide to transfer all those goods over to your original ship that you were using to capture it. Or you can leave it there because you've just captured that ship now. So you may want to split the cargo equally. Maybe your ship that you were on before is actually overloaded and you want to spread the cargo a bit between the two. And then, then you're on your way. That's not instant again. Transferring cargo takes time. So if you've just captured a ship, you may have to wait 5-10 minutes for that cargo to fully find its place wherever you decide to put it. And that leaves you open to attack, to someone potentially recovering their ship, to support that may have been planned but arrived too late to stop the battle in the first place, they may be now coming after you. So there's risk in doing that. And then once you, in terms of looting ships, right, that's the big thing, capturing a ship. That is a much more involved process. If you belong to one of the 5 nations, you have to go and register that ship at a port at basically the earliest possible moment. So I think historically there were specific ports that you could register ships at, and not all of them would allow you to do this. But for the purpose of for gameplay, you can register your ship at any port, and when you register your ship, you get a choice. You can either keep the name of the original ship, which is obviously now lost by the player that used to own it, or you can change the name at that time and register it anew with a new name. If you change the name, then we kind of kindly allow the original player to keep the name, but the service history doesn't stay with them still. The service history goes with you regardless. It's just changing the name of the ship. And ships keep a record of all the names it used to have as well. Just like if you go on Wikipedia and search, HMS Speedy, it had different names over the years based on who controlled it and owned it. Independent peoples can't register ships. So you cannot claim reputable insurance. So if you're a pirate and you've chosen to be an independent pirate, you cannot register your ship anywhere because there is nowhere to register it, and you cannot get nation-supported insurance. There's no bank there that's providing it for you. So it's whether or not a player will be willing to insure it for you. And that's obviously huge amounts of money for someone to offer an insurance company kind of service as a player. They're going to need to be incredibly wealthy. So the intention there is that pirates, be engaged in piracy is to have fast access to loot, but it's hard to maintain and keep. Whereas for nations, it's potentially harder to access the loot because you've got to follow laws and regulations on who you can attack and when. But once you've claimed that stuff and you've registered it as a prize, you keep it. It's yours, and you'll get a payout from the ship. There's a bit of a departure there from history in that if you claim a ship, it's not necessarily yours to keep in reality. It would be declared as a prize, I believe, and the captain gets paid out for part of the value. But for the purpose of sort of player agency and decision-making and rewards, we're allowing them to keep the ship they've captured.
Yeah, I think that's the better call, because it would suck if you would lose the ship after you captured it.
Maybe what we'll do is, and I have thought about this in the past, is that if you choose to sacrifice the ship and you don't want to keep it, maybe you get a payout in money. If you don't want to keep the ship you've captured, you still have a reason to take it back to port and sort of cash it in for some cash.
Yep, I can imagine that might be an interesting mechanic.
Yeah, virtual money. Maxime just said virtual money. Yeah, no real money, like currency stuff. I'm talking in-game cash.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Okay, so Fluffy Fishy asks, is there any chance of VR?
VR.
Virtual reality.
I would love that. It's not on the cards at the moment. We may find routes to collaborate with museums and provide VR experiences built off of the back of Ahoy. So we may go to the Royal Museum of Greenwich or something and say, hey, do you want a VR experience in your museum that you can walk around one of the ships? That would be great. I'd love to do that. Please get in contact if you want us to make HMS Victory or something. That'd be great. But ultimately, in terms of the game itself, I don't think VR is going to really be viable, mainly because of navigation. And I mean player sort of character navigation. That problem really hasn't been solved yet in VR. I'd love to be the one that figures that out, but it's another challenge that we really don't need to add onto the pile. So, hey, if someone figures out a way to walk around just as easily in VR as they can in a regular sort of game experience, I mean, I guess you can have a controller connected, right? You can do that kind of thing, but I think if we're going to go VR, we want to go as immersive as possible. So I don't know. No, really is the answer to your question, but maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, I think I get the problem. It's really difficult if you have to move around a lot on the ship and you just can't really immerse yourself if you are playing with a controller.
Yeah.
So I
Plus, if you're
think
like 6 foot, if you're 6 foot, you're going to be bumping your head on every ceiling in that ship constantly.
that's true. Yeah.
Uh, you have to be crouched literally 90% of the time to play the game. So yeah, maybe not.
Okay, then Techfire asks, will you be able to, for example, draw your own flag when you say you can represent yourself as an independent guy, just like you want?
Yeah. So the very original design included a flag designer. So you would actually there'd be an included system in the game where you can go and design a flag, and you can have it produced for a cost. The flag itself has the cost, not designing the thing that goes on it. Um, and when I say cost again, it's in-game cost. And so you can, in theory, design flags that way. We're not sure whether we're going to provide that yet or not. There's a few reasons why it may not be a good idea. Obviously, people could potentially abuse it. The flag designer is going to be built off of quite a regimented set of options, so you'll get a lot of flexibility in color and the different emblems you can choose. But we're not going to allow people just to draw anything because you can imagine what kind of things will appear. And equally, there's a certain level of authenticity for the players around you that we want to maintain. So having super bright pink flags with like really contrasting red emblem on it or something, it's just going to look awful for most people. And so we're going to limit sort of the color contrast in that system. And obviously, certain options will be barred completely as well. So, like, you can't just create the British flag or the Dutch flag again. Those options, that combination of options, will be locked out to you. So, there's a lot of depth there to explore, and it's quite a complex system to create. I'd love to include it, but yeah, I'm not sure. In terms of there was a really cool system way back when, during Pirates of the Burning Sea, where people could submit their own designs. I do like that. I've always liked that thought. The only problem with it is it creates a demand on the team to moderate the flags, and that might seem like a simple thing to do, but if you're running a business, you've got to be careful that you're not well, first of all, doing anything illegal. Putting things on a flag can be legal, like the Red Cross, for example. It's against international law, I believe. You can't allow people to put really bad historical flags that have got really horrible connotations on them. People could just upload like a picture of themselves or something, and so you've got to sift through all that stuff. I would sooner provide an option where you can create something that we know is going to be safe in the game, that doesn't require constant moderation and approval from the team, and yeah, just provides you guys with the ability to, if the options are available to you, you can make that flag and get it going. You don't have to wait like 2 weeks for us to approve it or anything. So yeah, that's kind of our stance on it at the moment. It'll fluctuate. One of the things I think is important for us is the design of the game just constantly changes based on feedback and how we feel the community sort of wants it to be.
Okay, then Rich asks another question, which is, what are the crew gonna do if you don't have the officers that you need for the ship? Are they going to sit on their phone if there are no officers, or are they going to be, for example, AI officers that you can command? How does that work if you haven't got the players, the real players to play
Sure.
with on the ship?
Yeah, so as I said before, each ship has a minimum recommended and maximum number of players. Some ships do have one as a minimum, so you can absolutely just do it yourself. You don't need anyone else. The ships that have more than one as a maximum, so 2 or higher, yes, it's more complicated. You require the right number of players to set sail. So when you begin a voyage, you'll need the right number of players on board at that moment in time. We don't want to punish the person left behind if someone has to go. Life can be busy and anything can occur for anyone at any time. So to just immediately kick you out of the game because you've lost your player crew is not a good idea, and nor should it be our goal. We would encourage actively that you find someone to replace them in that event, and there'll be ways to do that. Obviously, you can hire anyone through the local port job boards. In the event where players leave and you're undercrewed by players, player officers, you will be able to hire people directly to your ship rather than having to go to the port to do it. That's the only time that will be available. Otherwise, you have to go to a port to hire people. But you can also invite people directly from your friends, in-game friends list or on Steam, wherever else, and get them in. And they can actually, at the moment, the theory is that they'll be able to teleport directly to you. But when the voyage is complete, they may not stay where they ended up because they did that teleport process. So it's kind of an awkward scenario to try and solve to allow people to teleport like halfway across the map to join their friend immediately. We're looking at a way to try and solve that at the moment. In terms of the being undercrewed, there are some risks associated. So if you just flatly refuse to keep the minimum, you can technically still sail. You can still sail forward. You can try and keep up with the demands of what should be multiple people by yourself. But over time, your crew will grow restless and they will grow less willing to follow your commands because you're essentially unable to fulfill. You can't fulfill the demand, right? You can't provide the amount of player presence to really make that a reality. So the crew will eventually lose loyalty over time. They will fundamentally just, not immediately, they won't plummet. Their morale might take a dip at first, but then their loyalty will slowly go down and their morale will slowly go up because they're realizing, hold on a second, there aren't enough players to stop us from having a mutiny. And that's kind of how we're seeing it at the moment, is that trying to command a ship with not enough players will actually end up in potentially losing your ship. So really not desirable. Yeah.
Okay. Jay Fleming asks, how realistic will the navigation be?
Yes, fairly realistic. There'll be a number of ways you can navigate. The main one really is just looking at charts and figuring out your local surroundings and figuring out where you are. That can be done in a number of ways. So obviously you can get depth readings fairly frequently, and that will give you an indication of the depth in your current location, and then you can use that with the charts that you have in your quarters to sort of compare and figure out maybe, okay, if it's 5 foot deep, or fathoms, I think is the correct term. I don't know. My brain's completely gone on that one. But if it's 5 fathoms deep, then maybe you're in this area, and there's like a lighthouse over there that you can see, or there's a particular rock that is on the map that's pointed out, and so maybe we're here, right? You can also get an estimate kind of automatically. You can just spend time estimating your location, and it will give you a rough circle on your map. The map being a physical map in your cabin on the table, and there'll be a sort of glowing, I guess, or outlined area on the map that we think you're in. And the more time you spend estimating that, the more accurate it becomes. And yeah, basically that's how navigation works in terms of figuring out where you are, and in terms of where you want to go. The main aim is there's 2 ways. You can obviously just freeball it, and you can just sail wherever you want. You don't have to pick a location or a destination. But fundamentally, the main way I think people will probably navigate is to set a destination, and your crew generally will try and take you there. You don't have to literally steer every moment, every second. But there might be things that get in your way along the way, like weather and other ships, obviously, and pirates and floating shipwrecks, all sorts of things that could stop you from going the way that was originally planned. And that's where the navigation sort of becomes moment to moment, and you've got to really decide which direction to take.
Okay, if you don't mind, I would like to move it along a little bit faster from here on out, because I have 210 unread messages, and I want to get all of them
No problem.
in the next couple of, at least in the next hour, hopefully.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so then Fluffy Fishy asks, will sailors from nations you may have upset in the past be more unloyal?
Yes. So if you capture, because you can capture crew when you capture a ship. So if you capture a ship's crew and they join you, their loyalty is going to be pretty non-existent to begin with, and you've got to really make them happy for them to stick around. Equally, if you've gone and focused all of your efforts on taking out French ships, for example, you may try and hire some French crew potentially, but they're not going to be happy with you. So the reputation that you hold with the nations do indicate how the people that originate from those nations will feel about you.
Okay, then the next question from Deffendorf is, can you kill the current captain of your ship?
No. I mean, if you mean as a member of the crew, no, you can't just straight up kill. You can't technically, you can't kill any of your crewmates. The captain can kind of through punishment of the AI crew, but yeah, you can't just mindlessly kill your own crew. That would be nuts. Especially the captain. Like, the captain is the owner of the ship. So one of the things that I talked about before is mutiny, and players can't mutiny against their captain. That's the one kind of line we draw. It just doesn't feel good for anyone, really. Yeah, it's kind of funny the first time it happens for the people doing it, but ultimately, if you just invited a bunch of people into your ship and they just immediately mutiny, that's not a fun experience for anyone long term. So yeah, you can't kill your captain. Your captain can get killed, but yeah, not by your hands, at least directly.
Okay, then Alex the Fiend asks, if a ship sinks, do you lose everything, or is there some kind of item insurance?
Yeah, so the insurance you get is based on the value of the ship when you leave port. So if you're out at sea and you collect a ton of valuable stuff and you lose your ship and your cargo, that's not included in the insurance payout. It's only stuff that you had when you set out. That's intentional. Obviously, it makes a reason to go back to port and to submit your prizes and sort of register them as value to add to your insurance. But yes, you get basically a payout. What happens is, based on the reason that the payout is for. So if it sinks not by any mistake of yours, you can't just sink your own ship and then claim. That's your own fault. You're not eligible for a insurance claim. But if someone else sinks your ship or it gets lost in a storm, you'll get a payout for the value of the ship plus some cargo. Nations won't pay out for stolen cargo. Obviously, that's just not available. So yeah, basically you'll get some money back. You won't keep the items. You'll keep the items that are on your person at the time, and you'll basically die and respawn, or be captured and immediately respawn at the nearest port, and you can build your new ship.
Okay, in regards to the question of the commanding of officers on the ship, I didn't quite catch that. Can you have AI officers, or do these positions have to be fulfilled with players?
They have to be fulfilled by players. We're
Okay.
talking in the tens of people, not within 10 crew members in any size ship really. There will never be a ship that requires more than 10 people minimum. Even the absolute largest ships, like the first-rate ship of the line, will not require anything more than 10 people. But the smaller ships, 1 to 2 people minimum sometimes. But you need those to be players.
Okay. Then Capri1PL asks, will there be simulated corruption amongst the Admiralty?
Corruption. I think I might need some more context on that one.
I think it's regarding taking bribes as an admiral, for example. So depending on your rank, can you take bribes from somebody, or letting a ship go because they have bribed you to let them go? Stuff like that, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, sure, you can trade with people. So you could just, if for example, you're in the process of chasing someone and they surrender, and you don't come to a fight, and they say, hey, look, we'll give you this amount of money from my own personal wealth to let us go, and you can arrange that transaction, then sure, that's on you. There's no system in place to force that or require it, but you could do that, yeah.
Okay, then another question from Alex Defiant. Can you do jobs on land to gain money to help build a ship?
Not specifically jobs. No, you don't sort of get employed on land. You're always going to be at sea in terms of your sort of profession. I guess merchant is slightly different in that you've got a lot of the experience of being a merchant is about managing your goods, and that could be in multiple ports at once. You're not necessarily always transporting goods. You could be in charge of people that are transporting goods. So that, I guess, technically counts, but you're not going to go and work in a blacksmith or that kind of thing. That's not in the plan at the moment anyway. It would be cool. I think it could be kind of interesting, but the amount of work that requires is just next level. So yeah, we don't have any plan for that at the moment.
Okay. Then Jay Fleming asks, will the merchant navy pay more, as in line with the time?
Yeah, if I haven't read up on that particular element, but if that's true, then yes, absolutely. But it will be dependent on sort of player choice, because, for example, if you're going into a war, you may decide that you actually are going to prioritize, as a nation, you might prioritize paying your naval captains more. That is really up to the policy decisions based on the governors that get to vote on these things. And obviously, the vote is basically you get to vote for your governor in each port, and then the governors get to vote on the policy change, and then everyone of that nation gets to vote on the decision of that policy change. So those policy changes can be anything from changing custom tax and stuff like that, but also in this case deciding where money is spent.
I have so many comments on stuff related to your game in the chat. I think we are going to stick to the questions for now, and then at the end, I'm going to ask again if the attendees want to put in additional comments or thoughts or so, because otherwise it would be very hard because everything gets lost in the chat. So for now, I'm just going to stick to the questions, but I will get you another chance to put in additional comments a little bit later.
Cool.
So Invicta02 asks, will there be some land activities with other players so you could meet other captains and have a little chat? I mean, you already talked about this, but maybe you can just repeat it quite quickly, what there will be available in regards to that.
Sure. So ports, the current design is that ports are instanced. So there won't be necessarily hopefully there won't be a loading screen of any kind when you arrive in a port, but ultimately there are multiple versions of each port active at any one time based on how many players are currently in that location. There's a technical limitation. Essentially, we can't have hundreds and hundreds of players. 100 is probably about the maximum, but it might be a bit less. So there are multiple sort of realities. I guess it's a kind of a multiverse thing where you've got like 5 versions of Port Royal that are all technically the same. All of the stuff you can buy is the same. The availability of everything is the same, but it's like 5 copies of 100 players maximum in that space. As you join into a port, you can join with your friends, whether they're on your ship already. That's automatic, but you can also be in a fleet with other crews. So you could invite someone, another ship into your fleet, and then when you arrive at that port, you'll be automatically put into the same version of that town. But obviously, there are other people walking around that aren't in your fleet or aren't on your ship that you'll come across as well, and that's where loads of different opportunities for like social events could happen. Personally, I really want to get like a shanty band, a real life shanty band in to do like a monthly concert or something in one of the ports. That would be so cool, right? And then just have everyone arrive and listen to it. Loads of opportunities, but that's kind of like the future. In terms of just the features, you walk around, you're shopping, you go to the tavern, play a few board games, card games. Voice chat obviously is localized, so you can only hear people that are nearby, and you can shoot at people if you want. In terms of the dueling system, you can't actually just get off your ship and start shooting. You have to. It's a formal duel that you have to initiate. But yeah.
Okay, then Alex Defiant asks, will there be mini games on board of the ship?
Yeah, similar to the ports. Obviously, you've got the navigation and sailing mechanics. You've got guns to maintain. Mini games. Whenever that word is mentioned, I think of Puzzle Pirates, which is a big influence on the game. My brother and I used to play that a lot, but not so much mini games in the style that you may be familiar with Puzzle Pirates, where it's kind of like really mini games. But there will be things where you can play board games, around a table, or you can play card games, or you can come up with your own games. We'd love to have shanties as a system in the game, that kind of thing. So there's going to be ways that you can keep yourself busy other than just maintaining and managing your ship.
Okay. Okay, then the next question is, I had to scroll it for a little bit. The next question is there going to be chess available as a mini game?
Yes, there will be. That's definitely one of the ones we'll include. I would like checkers personally, or backgammon, maybe. I think backgammon is the more. Maybe checkers is accurate to the time too. I need to check, but yeah, and different card games as well. Liar's Dice. I saw someone write that in the comments, but yeah, Liar's Dice probably will be one that we'll try to include as well. So those are all later on. We won't have them to begin with, but we'd love to add them all. Obviously, the more the merrier, really.
Okay, the next question is, will the reputation have an effect on how you will get a ship? Like when you are very good with the governor, will he provide you an easier way, or like a voucher for a ship?
Cool. Yeah, that's an interesting one. So that's a choice up to you, really. If you're a merchant, or you're an independent person, a pirate, for example, no, there is no way to get given a ship unless another player gives you one, or you take it for yourself. As a Navy player, though, you do actually get given, I guess commission would be the technical term for that. You are commissioned to be on a particular ship, and so you don't technically own the ship in quite the same way when you're in the Navy. It allows you to gain access to ships that you otherwise would have to struggle to access without being in the Navy, because you're provided it based on your rank, and you don't pay as much for the upkeep. The Navy will cover that for you, but yeah, ultimately you can't just then ditch. I mean, I guess technically you could ditch the Navy and try and steal the ship away. That's just piracy, right? But you're going to be chased down for that. So, yeah, Navy players basically get given ships depending on the rank, but you'll still have some choice within that as well.
Okay, Banished Privateer asks, what have you learned from failed projects like Chronicles of Illyria, Rulers of the Sea, Skull and Bones, and so on? How do you plan to overcome the challenges and come up as a winner?
It's difficult. There's no promise that we will be able to succeed in any great sense, any different to any of them. You look at things like Star Citizen, and they've got enormous amounts of money, and they've taken a long time to get to where they are today. We don't have enormous amounts of money, and we're volunteers, so we are trying our absolute best. We're passionate about the thing we want to create. Like I said at the start, I've been thinking about this game for 15 years, probably 17 years. I want to play it. I want to exist within this world as a player. So that is really the primary drive. In terms of the other mistakes that were made, I think we have a benefit in some respects. Some of the mistakes that you may have mentioned there, like Skull and Bones or some of the sort of AAA titles, I think they are more sort of investors driven, based on their decision making. I don't think it's really the fault of the creative people making the game that those games may have those problems. And so I think in some respects, we avoid a lot of that by not having those huge stock shares owners, or share ownership people invested in the project. Equally, though, I think if we ever did, I'd want to make sure that we regain or maintain a significant amount of creative control. To try and wrap this up, in terms of the other mistakes made by other games, let's just look at them and learn from them as best we can. We will make mistakes. There is no doubt in my mind that we will get things wrong sometimes. We're just doing the best we can, and we'll try and learn from them and listen to the community.
Okay, Tranquility asks, are there going to be any public hangings in the game?
Tranquility, I saw that question come through. I'm not sure yet. It's a sensitive thing to represent. I think from a historical accuracy perspective, I'd like to include it, but I feel like it could get abused very badly by players. Let's see. I think it's also kind of got a little bit of a uncomfortable connotation around mental health and some other things as well. And I'm not that much in the school of thought of if something triggers someone, you shouldn't do it. But I think that may be one of those things where that's an uncomfortable thing to see. I'm not sure whether we'd want to include it. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
It's one of those things where, like, conceptually it's kind of cool to have like the punishment and law system, but to actually witness it and be involved in that, I'm not sure. I don't know how I feel about that.
Okay, the next question is from Maxime C. Will it be possible to be a peaceful fisherman just enjoying sailing and doing business on a small scale?
Yes, please. Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I want, really, honestly. The battles and the ship combat and boarding and piracy and all that stuff, it sounds great, and I'll probably get involved with it myself. But yeah, for me, honestly, just a game that I can load up, sit on a ship, and just fish. That sounds amazing. That's absolutely the sort of solo / with a small group of friends kind of thing that we want to create. As an option. You don't have to do that, obviously, but yeah, that would be amazing. I'd love, for me, right, I guess this is a good thing to say. My personal bar for success is that if I can load up Ahoy sometime in the future and sit on a beach somewhere and watch the world go by and not do anything myself but just sit there and watch, that to me means that we've succeeded in creating this vision.
It sounds like the scene from Pirates of the Caribbean 1, where they are stranded on the lonely island in the middle of nowhere, and they just watch the sea go by.
If that's fun, if that's enjoyable and relaxing, then I feel like we've won, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Then
Rich asks, will boarding be UI based or based on actual combat?
Actual combat.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's complicated, honestly. I still don't have answers to a lot of those design questions around boarding. It is an insanely complex thing to do. You've got two physics-based ships based on buoyancy that can bump into each other and be apart and pull apart and come closer. You've got AI crew that need to navigate around those ships and potentially cross between them. You've got players and the number of players to consider. So, for example, if you've got a ship that's got 5 players on one and 5 on the other, that's 10 people that you've got to now put into a sort of battle instance and represent in some way. Equally, there's the question of, okay, what if another ship comes by and another 10 people join in some other way, and you've got this growing server side. There's so many challenges. We want it to be immersive, we want it to be realistic, and we want it to be devastating. Boarding should be really the last resort for most captains. I don't think it should be something that you do every time you engage someone. Really, surrendering is the best route for people, I think. Boarding is if you really want to force that decision to happen.
Henry asks, is it safe to say that one of the largest focuses of this game is to create a social gaming environment?
Yeah, absolutely. Immersive as well. Just, yeah, like I said, just being able to load up the game and chill in the tavern and listen to some band play a shanty in the background and have fun playing some chess or something, that to me is creating a really cool space. It's like, I'm so proud of the community that we already have in our Discord and how friendly everyone is. We very rarely have any. We've had some debates and things that have got a little bit sour sometimes, but for the most part, it's such a nice place to be in, and I've seen that as well in the Pirates Ahoy server as well. I want a physical representation of those Discords to exist so that people can come together and do what they do in Discord, but just together in an environment where they can play games and that's it really. Gaming is about doing stuff together. But for me, games are for me personally. Look, I'm currently discovering whether I have an autism diagnosis or not. I don't like social interaction, so games for me are my social outlet. So yeah, absolutely for me, 100%. Social, community driven. Friendly and welcoming with a bit of spice in there. Like, you've got to have rivalry and fighting, but yeah, keeping it friendly.
Ethan Dorf asks, can I have a locker that grows with treasure the more loot I get?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Can I have a locker that grows with treasure the more loot I get?
Oh, I see. Yeah, so every officer on the ship will have their own personal locker, which is just where their personal belongings are kept during the time they're on the ship. Like I said, personal belongings don't get lost if the ship is sunk. So that includes the stuff that's in the personal locker. That's the only sort of exception, I guess. In terms of it growing in size or treasure, we're not really in the time of the Spanish treasure fleets anymore. So you're not really hauling around huge amounts of gold. I mean, technically, you probably could if you find that much, but yeah, it's not really a case of having like a big pile of gold somewhere in the bottom of your ship that you're looking at. It's much more. You'll have a record on you of how much money you have available, and when you're paying for things, you're essentially giving you an IOU, just like banknotes in real life. They're just a promise from the bank to pay the person a certain sum, and that's kind of how money will work in Ahoy, and that you'll have your wealth, which will be back in your home port, but you can promise amounts of that money to people, and you have to give it to them once once it goes through, the money is removed. It's kind of an automated process. So yeah, you're not going to see massive piles of money. That's kind of, it's a little bit fantasy, I guess, for us.
Okay, then Banished Privateer asks, have you seen the game World of Sea Battles? They've got a lot of attention and had the servers overwhelmed by thousands of players. If you know this project, what do you think stands behind the partial success so far, and can you capture some of these aspects and implement them within Ahoy?
Yeah, great game. I'm actually to be honest, quite surprised by the success they've had, mostly because, at least when I played it a while back, there was quite a barrier of entry to play it, mostly language. They may have solved that since then, and maybe that's somewhat responsible for the recent success. The game is great. What I played from it, it was very reminiscent of other games that were already out there for me. It came to, naval action, Pirates of the Burning Sea came to mind in different ways. There are definitely lessons to learn from that game as well. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to chat with the developers and figure out, how they solved some of those challenges. I don't know whether they'd be willing to share it. That's up to them, obviously. But yeah, pirate games together strong, I think is the sentiment, right? If we can all band together and make the best games.
Sea Shepherd asks, will there be a teleport option?
Yeah, so I mentioned that before. We're kind of figuring it out from a design standpoint. A lot of this is still on paper, so we're still sort of figuring out what's viable and what's not. I don't like the idea that if you join in the game and your friend is halfway across the map from you, and that's like 3-4 hours of sailing to get there, that you can't immediately play with them. I feel like that is probably, it goes against the idea of being able to be playing with your friends, sort of very community-driven social experience. And additionally, if we've got a limitation on you need a certain number of players to crew a ship and your friends are too far away to help you, that just makes that issue even more of a problem. So I think we will probably have some form of teleporting to a ship to do a particular job or voyage. So, for example, if you are in Port Royal, Jamaica, when you sign in and your friend is in Trinidad and Tobago or something, that's probably like a 3-hour sailing trip, real time 3-hour sailing trip to get between those two ports. You can't just make players do that to meet up. That's just insane to me. So we probably allow that player to teleport to the captain's ship, and how we handle their eventual location after that voyage is kind of up for debate. We either decide to then teleport them back to where they started from, so they'd end up back in Port Royal, or maybe we decide to let them stay with their captain. It's kind of up for debate. We don't really have an answer for it yet.
Okay.
Share your thoughts, by the way, on that. Like, go and post your feedback on that idea, and we'll listen to it. Sorry. Yeah.
Will there be horses in the game?
Technically, yes, but you can't ride them. There will be horses and other farm animals, obviously, in the ports. And not being able to ride them is kind of half true, in the sense that if we ever do add inland ports, which are absolutely not on the cards right now, not on the timeline, but if we did ever add like Spanish Town in Jamaica, which is inland, then chances are there would be some form of teleporting in the form of a fast travel option to get onto a carriage or something, and it would take you there. Because it's inland and because everyone would have to do that same trip that same way, there isn't really a downside to letting people travel like that. But because people need to travel these long distances to get from port to port, the teleportation at sea is a little bit more advantageous, I guess. If you could just teleport your whole friend group to a battle that's just taking place and then overwhelm the battle because you can just get there instantly, that kind of spoils the fun.
Question from Rich: will the ships need to be built or bought? Likewise, will you need to build cannons and equipment for the ships, or are they purchased or stolen?
Both. All, yeah. Stolen, purchased, or built. You won't actually be physically building plank by plank a ship. That's another whole game. There's a game out there, I think Shipbuilding Simulator or something, that's coming out soon. Go play that. It would be nice for us to represent some stages of construction visually, but there's a whole lot of technical and artist challenges to do that. The process of building a ship it will be a timed thing. It will take a certain amount of real time for the ship to appear. But you should be aware that you always will have some form of boat. It might not be a ship. It may just be a little yacht or something, or a little sort of harbour boat or whatever it might be, or personal boat. But you will always have a way to get around. It just might not be the way you choose. You have to wait until the ship's built. Ships are built at a port at a certain location, and they will launch there too. So you can't just grab any ship at any time. If you leave a ship somewhere, you have to go there to get it.
Okay. I'm going to ask you for ultra short answers now because we still have 455 messages to go through.
Oh,
so this is going to take a while. And let's hope we can do it in 1 hour.
Yeah, the only thing limiting me now is my ability to keep my voice going.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so will ports also provide missions? For instance, working for governors, admiralities, or criminals approaching you to smuggle goods or something?
In theory, yes. You get missions. Narrative missions, and the job board also provides missions that you can complete as a crew. So that could appear there, I suppose. I don't think we'd really have a system in place that is specifically designed for that. Missions can be created by other players as well. So if a player wants to have 6,000 wood logs transported from A to B, they can put a mission up on the mission board, and players can complete that for them and get a payout, and the payout's pre-agreed. I don't know really that system that they're sort of that sort of scenario that they're proposing would be a system in the game specifically. It would just be created through other systems that already exist.
Engraved asks, what will be the maximum amount of ships or players allowed into battles, or do battles take place in the open world? Will it be more like naval action, or will it be more like EVE Online?
I would love for it to be like EVE Online. If I'm understanding correctly, that there is no separate area that the battle takes place in. But to be realistic, unless we've got Star Citizen money and Star Citizen technology, we can't do the whole server meshing stuff ourselves. That's like a whole technical challenge that they've spent millions of dollars trying to solve. So at the moment, being realistic about it, it will be an instance situation. So when you're in the regular world, which isn't like an overworld map, you're not seeing the map from above or anything. You're still sailing in first person the whole time. But if you engage with a ship, there will probably be at least in the current design, there will be a sort of an area around that ship that becomes immediately part of the battle. Even if you're not being attacked, you will get dragged in because you're in that sort of area. You can flee, obviously, and you can not get involved, or you can help. So that sort of area becomes an instance, and that battle takes place. And whether or not people can join in on that is really down to that technological limit. Obviously, let's say as a rough number that every ship on average has 10 players. Well, you can only have 10 ships because the maximum in one server is 100 people. 10 ships doesn't seem like a line battle, but 5 against 5 in first person, there could potentially be quite big ships, is fairly impressive and probably quite terrifying. So obviously the more players you have, the more limited it could become. And that creates a problem of how do you plan that battle, right? If you've got 6 huge ships with maximum number of crew, you probably can't fit into that server at once. So then how do we solve that problem? And that's still something that we need to figure out.
Next question is, can independents create structures within the game, or is that all going to be unofficial outside of the game mechanics?
Structures? Like buildings?
Yeah, probably. Something like that.
Yeah, so we haven't spoken about wild ports at all yet, and I won't go into it because I know we're tight on time, but at least not into it in too much detail. Wild ports are basically a future feature where you can claim a port that doesn't exist yet and build it. Existing ports cannot be modified. They are as they were historically speaking. But wild ports can be eventually founded by players and built. They have a predetermined layout for the port. So there are build patches where you can put buildings. The process of building a building requires resources and money and time. And so those three things get combined by all the players that want to contribute towards the construction. But the players ultimately get to choose where the buildings get put in those sort of fairly large plot areas, and other stuff kind of procedurally gets generated around it as things develop.
Okay. Next question is, how much can be customized on ships?
Sort of, it depends what you consider customization as a viable amount. I mean, customization of colors, pigment colors of the ship, yes, absolutely. Flags, as we've discussed, can be swapped. You can fly a false flag for a bit and try and trick someone to think that you're British instead of French, or French instead of British. I don't want to pick sides. You can also change the figurehead. You can change some things about the inside of the ship. So each officer's quarters that they're assigned will take a sort of the customization options that player has decided. If you change to a different ship and you're given a room on that ship, your customization options carry over to that room as well. And for captains, obviously they've got the most control. They can change the colors of the ship. It costs resources to do so. You don't just do it anytime. You've got to have the pigments and the money to get it done. I mean, there are some other customization options and a lot of stuff for characters as well. So,
ITF Hunter asks, have you thought about what compromises you want to make between reality and playability, and to what extent you can balance these two very different sides of the media? This is in terms of the PvP battles on the map and the relatively large number of players that you're going to have on the map.
Yeah. Well, obviously that's a good problem to have if you've got lots of players. So hopefully that is the case. But yeah, in terms of balancing that kind of thing, there's two ways of balancing, right? There's the balancing of gameplay, which I think is what the question is about, in terms of having that many players and combat and that kind of thing. That is absolutely an ongoing process. We don't have an answer today because the gameplay doesn't fundamentally exist at this level that we're talking about yet. So balancing comes over time, feedback from the community, testing, that kind of thing. I think there was a bit in the question about historical accuracy and fun, like kind of that kind of balancing. I've talked about that before. There's only a few places where we're really making significant adjustments. One, you can't trade and transport slaves. Obviously, that's just would be absolute career suicide. Two, you can play as female characters and you can hire female crew. It's optional. If you don't want to hire female crew, you don't have to. And any customization options that we deem are ahistorical, such as colored sails or I'm trying to think of other options, but colored sails is a good example. Mostly in reality, sails are white. And so there will always be an option to disable colored sails for your own perspective. And so if someone changes their color to black for their sails, if we include that, then you can hide that and you can just see the white sails for everyone.
Will nations make official declarations of war against each other?
Yes. Yeah, so it's a process. War slides basically into view. So transgressions that are performed by players of each nation sort of tip the scale towards war. You can be an ally and slowly over the course of people stealing other nations' ships or attacking the wrong people or capturing crew, stealing loot, that kind of stuff. All of that stuff is a transgression against the other nations. And as the nation-to-nation opinion swings negatively, you get closer and closer to war. And then essentially there will become a time within, if you imagine it kind of like a speedometer or like a dial, right? A gauge. As it goes further towards war, towards the left, there's sort of a band in that dial where any of the nations that have that opinion of the other can formally declare war, and that's decided by a vote from the governors. They propose the idea, and then the players in that nation can vote on it. So it's not like technically you can't just declare war by surprise, because I'm sure some people will say, oh, they're voting to declare war. But in reality, if you look at, I mean, I don't want to talk about current politics at all, but that's kind of how war works. You kind of know it's on the horizon anyway. So this idea of a surprise war doesn't really exist.
Okay. Then Coltis asks, open world travel, how will my ship with other players' crew travel the map? Say if you need to go from Jamaica to Little Antilles, is it going to be taking real-time long travel, or map travel will be compressed?
Compressed, so I think it's like 300 hours or 500 hours or something crazy to travel from one end of the map to the other in reality. That would just be, no one would play it. Maybe a few would, but yeah. So the aim at the moment is sort of 5 to 6 hours maximum from one end of the map to the other. Still means that if you want to go for a long journey, you can, and I think that's part of the intention there is obviously for us to create these long journeys. But there is a time compression, certainly, when you're sort of in open sea, and this is something that we're still figuring out, but you will essentially be traveling much quicker, but not because the speed of your ship is increasing. You're still going at what looks like an appropriate speed. It's just when you're in that area of the map, it just covers so much smaller an area than the rest of the world does. So if you were to sail around the coastline, it would take you that long, the true value. But obviously for most people, they're probably not going to do that. They're going to go into the open sea and try and speed across the open sea parts.
Maxime C asks, can you change the colors of the ship if the colors that you are going to use are historically accurate?
Maxime, you're asking questions and you're a developer. Cheeky. Yes and no. So if you're in the Navy, your color choices are more limited, based on the Navy. Based on the Navy restrictions. But if you're independent, you can choose any colors you like. If you want to paint your ship to look like a French ship, then you might get mistaken for a French ship. That could potentially be a ruse that you could try and play.
Okay. Can you switch out the cannons that the ship came with afterwards?
Yes. So ships' guns are replaceable. They do decay over time, and like with the ships, you have to maintain them. You have to keep them ship shape, and guns can break and be destroyed, and they can be replaced. So in most cases, ships will have a certain limit. You can't just get any old ship and stick 42-pounder guns on there. I don't think there will be any ships in the game that will allow 42-pounders, except maybe first rates. But there will be sort of a band of acceptable sizes, and that will essentially be based on the ship itself. You can swap out for different materials potentially, so bronze may be an option rather than iron, and carronade over cannon could be an option. But yeah, it's mostly limited to what's sensible for that ship. You can't go and put rocket launchers on, on a little boat. You'll flip over. It wouldn't work.
Okay, then I found this message really funny, so I'm going to read it out loud. Fluffy Fishy mentioned that he would like to see a mechanic implemented where you can only send messages to other players in bottles only.
I love the idea that you can send messages in a bottle. Why not, right? That's fun. That won't be the only form of communication. But maybe it'll be a fun feature to add. Like you just are on the beach and you just see a bottle appear, and it could be anything in it. Could be fun.
Okay, the next question is, did you manage to purchase Rulers of the Sea IP? Can you share how did the interaction go?
Yeah, I mean, nothing happened there. Quite disappointing, really. But we made an offer to purchase both the Discord community space and the website and the IP, and they just didn't really follow through. The Discord went off to a community member before the communication kind of ended. I was in email conversations, and as I sent emails off, the Discord was handed over. So yeah, I don't think that they were too. Maybe they didn't like what we were doing. We stepped on their toes at some point. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's not happening certainly.
Can I keelhaul my enemies?
Keel hauling, kind of like hanging, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
These sorts of things, I think, would be something we explore in story, in like narrative content, where it might happen to a character as part of a storyline or something. I don't think we're gonna let people get keel hauled. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think it would really add anything to the experience. If you keel haul someone, they're basically gonna die, and your crew are just gonna fear you more, which I guess maybe might increase their morale. I don't know. It didn't. Yeah, and as someone has just said, it didn't really happen that much. The later you go into the 18th century, so yeah, keel hauling. No, I don't think so, unless it's done as part of like a narrative. There are some kind of scary questions going on in there. Keel hauling, hanging. I have to wonder, who are you really making this game for?
Next question would be: will 490mm cannons be available?
I'm not familiar with that terminology or that scale. Potentially,
Me neither, but I would assume that they are really, really big.
Yeah, I don't know. I would need to know, like, if they existed sometime between 1770 and 1785, and were actually used at sea. Maybe, but the answer is probably no, based on the last couple of questions being quite funny.
Will I be able to have a wife and children and then them for a life of piracy?
Oh god. I had a dream the other night where I was imagining, and this is how dedicated my brain is to this project. I had a dream about a possible feature for the game. Heaven help me. But I kind of like the idea. I like the idea that you'd have a family at home and like there would be a narrative surrounding like having a wife and kids or a husband and kids. But I don't know. It kind of sits outside the scope of the game, I think, and it would be very difficult to include and for what purpose, I suppose. And they certainly wouldn't be able to go with you anywhere, so they'd be stuck at home all the time.
Okay, next question. I mean, you have already answered this quite a lot, but not. I think they didn't answer this detail. So once again, will there be personal ship modifications available, like changing the rigging or increasing armor and armament, but having a slower ship and less cargo space, for example?
Yes, to some of that. You can't really armor a ship more than it already is. It's built with the armor that it has on it. You can use, I guess, different types of wood to make it stronger, but we're not doing the metal plating skull and bones like side armor stuff. It's just even if it is historically accurate somewhere, I just think it's ridiculous. So no, not armor. Your ship is what it is. It is at its best when you keep it maintained and happy and healthy. Customization options for colors and figureheads and flags and sails potentially and stuff like that. Yes. I think there may have been something else as well.
Notorious ALB asks, will cargo mass be simulated to affect handling characteristics?
Yes, you won't be placing individual crates or barrels. That is kind of an automated process, as I said, but you do choose where it's located in the ship. So if you put heavy stuff towards the front and light stuff towards the back, it's probably going to impact your sailing ability, positively or negatively. I don't really know, but we'll find out. I'm sure.
Will you be choosing the name of the ship from a pool of pre-written names, or will you
Yes.
be able to name it everything you want?
So it's a good question. Both with ships and with player names, character names, you choose your name from a pool of names, and that pool of names is extremely long. We're talking tens of thousands of options, and so running out of ship name options is unlikely. It's also a question of being able to combine stuff as well. The reason we're going this route is because we don't want any like early 2000s username character names and like, you know, the usual stuff that you'd see in maybe an MMO or something. That kind of spoils the immersion for people. For ship names, it's also just a question of there are so many options to choose from already. Why like clutter it with weirdly named stuff? Yeah, there's a lot to figure out there in terms of how that combines together and making sure people can have what they want. We may have a number of ships that have the same name, and there's like a maximum of like 10 of the same name or something. Or it could just be that every name is unique. We're not sure yet.
Guys, I'm asking you, please write in your questions if you have any more now, because I'm going to close the space to write questions since we are going to try to wrap this up in, let's say, half an hour or something like that. So if you have any questions, write them in now, and then afterwards you can still comment on other stuff. But for questions, write it in now. One question here is, are orders to AI historic and similar to a painted ocean, or will they be modernized with a 360-degree compass?
A little bit of both, I think. It's going to be a bit more accessible, I think. Don't get me wrong, love Painted Ocean. If you haven't played it, go and play it. It's free. Just download it and play. But for someone who doesn't know what the terms mean, it becomes fairly difficult to really know what you need to do, especially as a new player. So somewhere in the middle, it will have that level of depth to some degree, but the way you access those decisions, I think, will be hopefully a bit more clear to the players, that are just getting started. Easy to learn, hard to master, I would say, is the aim.
Can my crew die of scurvy?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Feed them some fruit. God. Yeah, feed them fruit.
Okay, I'm trying to look for another question. If you can steal a flag and use it as your own to fool your enemy, can you also repaint your ship on the seas to conceal it even more?
Yes, but it takes time and you need the paints on you. So if you carry them and you are able to sit still for a little while it gets painted, then sure.
Could we add bad luck if you don't break a champagne glass and get rid of all the decor after renaming a ship?
Bad luck is interesting. It's kind of like the Jonah, mysticism stuff around. I don't know whether you've seen Master Parts of Caribbean, Master and Commander, but yeah, I kind of like the idea of like a sort of I don't know, sort of bad luck. People are bad luck, and they might affect the ship in some way, but I doubt we'll do it. I think it's a bit too conceptual.
Are you able to build or purchase a home at ports?
Watch this space? No, but maybe someday. I'd like it, I think, is my answer.
Has it been confirmed that AI warships will be in the game, not only traders?
Yes. So, assuming we can solve all of the problems with all of the stuff that I've talked about, the aim would be that AI or NPC crew and ships, whether they're naval or merchant or independent, pirates, all of that, there will be many other ships out there that aren't players, basically.
Okay, looking for another question. Will there be global chat or nation chat or the equivalent of that, but with carrier pigeons?
Actually, I really like that idea. I think there was it Guild Wars 2 that had carrier pigeons in it, or something like that. I actually really liked that feature. It was just a regular like MMO mail feature, but if it was a kind of cool way of showing it, yeah, maybe. There will be a global chat for your nation, but it will only be available to certain people. So you can read it as anyone, but it's potentially only going to be possible for captains, for example, to write in it. I'd look at uh, oh my god, what's the World War Two game? Totally lost the name. World War Two shooter game. Someone will know it in the chat. Um, totally lost my train of thought. But anyway, that game, Hell Let Loose. That's the one I'm thinking of. Right, there we are. That one has like a commander-only chat that they can talk regardless of distance, I think, but the regular soldiers can only talk locally. It'll be that kind of thing, because we want to encourage sort of the communication to be per ship and for ship-to-ship communication to exist separately. But Discord exists, and people will probably go around it, so we'll see.
Can we navigate by the stars?
Yes, that's the intention. It won't be there from the start, but it's our every intention to have celestial navigation.
Okay. Looking for another. Okay. Will it be boarding or will it just be a cutscene and who wins depends on who has more crew, more experienced crew, and better weapons? You already answered this.
Yeah, you're
Live
gonna watch your
boarding.
crew die. You're gonna watch like little Jimmy get his head cut off.
Shame. Poor
little
Jimmy.
little Jimmy, who is 18, because we can't have kids being killed in boarding action.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Is there a mix of P versus E and P versus P, or just P versus P?
Both. The shared world idea is that you can do what you want. You can go and only target AI ships, AI captains. You can not target anyone and just fish. You can do missions that don't involve killing, hopefully. Yeah, bit of everything. But they also all exist at the same time. So it's not risk-free choosing to do PvE stuff only. I know there's a lot of people that are like worried about that aspect of it. I think just hold your horses and see what we can do, because I don't personally think that games out there have quite got it right yet. And I think maybe we'll get lucky and the two can coexist in a nice way.
Question: if your ship is getting stolen by a pirate, what happens next?
Well, goodbye ship. You have a few options. Obviously, if the pirate is asking you to surrender, you can try and bribe them to let you go. That is an option. If they're literally on your ship already, they've boarded, and you are essentially at gunpoint being told to surrender, then it's outside of your control at this point. It's up to what the pirate wants to do. They might sink your ship for some reason. I don't see why they would want to do that. Sinking ships didn't really happen very often, and when it did, it took a long time. But yeah, your ship might get sunk, and in which case you'll get essentially captured by the pirates. And when you get captured, you're not stuck in their ship for like 3 hours while they aimlessly sail around. You'll just get teleported immediately back home. But because they've captured you, when they get back to port, they can ransom you, even though you're technically elsewhere already. I know it doesn't necessarily make sense, but they can ransom you having been captured for some money. I hope that makes sense. It's sort of the player that gets captured isn't forced to be in the ship, but the person that captured you still gets some reward for doing so. If you're killed, then immediately teleported straight back to your home port. When you die, technically you get 3 choices: your home port, nearest port to where you currently are, and the national capital, which can all be different. So you get 3 choices, and your crew know where you've chosen, so they can go with you or separately to somewhere else. Your crew is either captured, killed, or lost in some respect, in some way. They may mutiny, and if they mutiny and sail back as an AI ship themselves, they may rejoin you if their loyalty was high before. And if the ship is lost, then you've got to build a new one. That's basically it. There's a load of variables.
Okay.
Like I'm trying to cover it all, but yeah, there's tons there.
Will there be an option to attack an enemy as a fleet of 15 fishermen rowboats and win in the boarding?
Good luck. Yeah. I mean,
Can you date
technically,
someone in a tavern?
yeah. Yeah, maybe take bets.
This question was about dating someone in a tavern, so
Oh,
getting a girl or a husband or something.
I mean, other players, I guess. Would be cool to have one of those like famous video game marriages that happen in Ahoy. That'd be cool. But no, you're not going to be like speaking to NPCs and wooing them Baldur's Gate 3 style. That's not really the scope of the game. Maybe one day, I don't know. I doubt it.
An interesting question here is how many islands are in the game?
This is a really passive aggressive answer, but go to Google Maps, search Caribbean, and then like roughly choose like the top left corner being just northwest of the Gulf of Mexico, and the bottom right corner being just southeast of Trinidad and Tobago, and then count the number of islands that are in that space.
Okay.
There isn't a number, essentially.
Will the Admiralty be player or AI led?
Can you repeat that again? I'm not sure I quite understood.
Yeah, so will the Admiralty or the governor and the politics stuff, will it be random or will it be AI led or be a player led?
It's kind of like a quote unquote perfect democracy, in the sense that everyone gets a vote on everything, but what they get to vote on is proposed by the governors. So you get to vote on your governor, the governor gets to vote on policies that are put forward to a vote. And then when something is put forward for a vote, then everyone in the nation can visit a port, vote on the issue, and then the decision is made for the nation by everyone. The only exception there is that people get a certain number of votes depending on what they're voting on. So if you're voting on a port-specific issue that's only affecting the port that that you're voting in, then your representation is actually dependent on how much you're involved in that port. So if you've got investments there, you've got a warehouse with tons of goods, you're a merchant that works out of that port, you're probably going to get more votes than someone who's never been there before. And actually, one of the requirements is that you have actually been to a port to vote on port-specific things. For nation-specific things, you can go to any port to vote on those, but yeah, it's much more balanced based on like naval rank and wealth and that kind of thing. It's not, again, like I said, quote unquote perfect democracy. It's not really that, but it's everyone gets a vote.
Okay, then what if I have to leave halfway through a voyage? Will I rejoin in the same spot or where do I get?
So when you join a crew, obviously the captain is always on the ship. So if you log out and log back in, the ship hasn't moved any more than it should. It will still sail if there's anyone else on it. So if you rejoin, you'll be where you expect. For other players, if you're given a room on the ship, if the captain has given you a room, then you will either, when you die or when you log back in, you will be on the ship still. And if you die, you will respawn in the ship in your room. If you don't have a room, then you're not really supposed to be on the ship because the captain hasn't decided you're actually worthy of a space. You're just a freeloader. You're a what would we call them? Tag along, stowaway. And so yeah, you will either log in, depending on how we end up doing it. You'll either log in and be very quickly drowning where you logged out, or you will be given the option to teleport back to those 3 different locations like I discussed when you die. The only difference is you don't die from it. So you don't get any of the other downsides to dying, like death, for example.
Okay, next question is wind speed will have an effect, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. the whole sailing experience is based around wind direction, weather, wind speeds, wind changes in a grid. You don't really notice the grid, but you've got to imagine that the whole Caribbean is divided up into this huge like grid paper diagram, and for every little square in that grid, you get a random wind value based on the time of the year and some slight average sort of random noise added to it. And as you go between these invisible grid squares, you get an average of the squares around you. And so the wind is constantly changing based on what should be real wind patterns in real life. And yeah, it'll change season to season. And you have to know where the wind's coming from to make sure you're sailing in the right direction.
Next question is, I think you can just answer this in a couple of taglines. Who are you making this game for?
Me. I'm making it for myself. And my brother. Like I said, we've dreamt about this for 15 years. We want to play it. We're making it for you guys too, but ultimately we're selfish, and it's all me, baby.
Then next question is, did you ever get your hands on a copy of the History of English Sea Ordnance 1523 to 1875, Volume 2, The Age of the System from 1715 to 1815?
That's hilarious. I know who's asking that. No, we didn't find it. I think I know who's asking that.
This is Harvard.
Yeah. No, we didn't find it. We didn't end up needing it in the end. So maybe if someone has it and we can look at that book, it might help. But ultimately, I think we made a decision without it that we're happy with. So,
will there be skins available for the ships for cosmetics only? For example, season skins in regards to the seasons, or Black Pearl skins, stuff like that.
No Black Pearl. We would very quickly get lawyers from Disney down our necks.
Yes.
Yeah, and also it doesn't really fit within the time period that we're representing, and there's a load of other things there that would make it not possible. But in terms of cosmetics, we haven't made a decision. There will absolutely be some stuff that we sell as cosmetics. What those will be, we're not sure. Gear like your clothing and your figureheads and ship colors and flags and sail colors are all cosmetic only. They give no influence on gameplay at all. Clothing has no stats. It's just cosmetic. So we will absolutely have some stuff that we sell, but for the most part, you should be able to gain everything in the game through your own achievements and just purchasing new clothing from the tailors or whatever. And so yeah. As for adding stuff from other games and other universes, I think that the most likely one we would ever do is if Disney ever came to us and said, "Hey, do you want to do a collaboration on Master and Commander?" Because they own the rights to that now. Yeah, let's look at that, right? But it's because it fits the universe. We're creating something that's realistic and historically accurate. And so adding Jack Sparrow and his outfit and his ship probably would get us sued and also wouldn't fit.
Yes, I wouldn't recommend doing that either. Weather changes, effects on ships and AI, clothing for weather that can give boost or stop negative effects.
So we're talking about maybe having is it a boat cloak? I think it's called, just a cloak in general.
Yes, right.
Yeah. So temperature is a concern. You're going to be worrying more about being too hot than too cold. You're in the Caribbean. The winter is rarely harsh in the way that the other areas of the world are used to. But there are hurricanes and really bad storms. If you've been in the water and you've got wet and it's colder than usual, maybe you'll catch a chill. I don't know. Yeah, potentially some clothing might give you some sort of atmospheric benefits, but you're never going to get +5 to your damage or extra 10 hit points because you're wearing a tricorn or something like that. Yeah, just doesn't make sense.
Okay, then actual question from Maxime. Will there be any survival need like a hunger bar?
Yes, yeah. So hunger, thirst, health, and stamina are the 4 bars you have to worry about as a player. Um, they're forgiving. You don't have to eat as regularly as you would in real life. We're probably going to tailor it, tone it down a little bit. But generally speaking, you need food to keep going. The main thing is making sure your crew is fed. Not being fed yourself is unlikely to be the end of your game because when you die, you're just going to respawn in your room again. It's a little bit sort of unnecessary, maybe. But if you've got low hunger and you've got low thirst and therefore low stamina, you're going to be slower at doing stuff. Your commands potentially won't be as well received because you don't have the power to back them up. And if you're doing jobs like climbing the rigging, then maybe you'll fall.
Okay. This next question is a funny one and kind of killed me when I read it. Will you be able to fall in love with a manatee after being at sea too long?
Or like, can we add like Wilson? Would that still be copyright?
Yeah.
Can we just add Wilson to the game? Yeah, I don't know. No, is the answer, but who knows?
Okay, let's have a look. Another question. Okay, another question. Plans for medical systems, dragging unconscious to the doctor, surgery, etc.
Yeah, I'd love to do this. It's again adding more complexity to boarding, dragging people around and stuff. That's just like a really complicated problem to solve. There will be a doctor on board. It won't be a player at the moment, at least. That's the current thinking. The doctor surgeon will be essentially a person you have to hire, an AI character, and that is going to during combat act as your respawn point. Unless you're in boarding action, and then it starts to get less likely that you'll be able to respawn. Yeah, medical systems. You can take damage per body part. Most gunshots are going to be pretty much insta kill. Certainly a headshot, you're just gone. You won't know anything about it. Black screen, done. But yeah, if you lose a hand or something, you'll probably be knocked down and be able to maybe fend for yourself a little while longer while you bleed out. Unless you get dragged to a doctor, and realistically, if you're losing limbs, you're probably not going to survive the battle. It's only after the battle that they can really save people that have lost limbs, I think.
Is marooning people a thing?
Marooning people?
Yes.
Hadn't really thought about it. I mean, I guess technically you could just say, "Hey, you no longer have a room on my ship," while they're already on the island, and then just sail off. I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure you'd get very many crew members offering to serve you if you keep doing that. Marooning AI, probably not. I can't see a real reason to do that. I mean, I suppose you could maroon disloyal crew. That could be kind of cool. But yeah, I'm not sure. Probably not. Maybe.
Are peg legs and hook hands possible?
For AI crew, yes. Just AI in general, characters, yes, they can lose limbs and maintain that state and then have prosthesis to replace it, mostly peg legs and crutches. But for players, no. At the moment, we're not thinking players can have a peg leg, but that could change. Depends. If you lose arms, you'll always get them back when you die, basically, as a player, because as soon as you lose an arm, your character is ruined. You can't fight or do anything.
Okay, so with this we have answered all the questions. There are just some general comments now that I'm going to read out. I think this is the most important one here. what I meant by structures for independence was like social structures, guilds, groups, clans, fleets,
Oh, okay.
stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, regardless of whether you're in a nation or not, you can start. We're not sure what we're calling them yet, but I guess guilds is probably the best way of describing them, which is a permanent group of people. Guilds can take ports, um, but that doesn't necessarily mean they'll maintain them, because when a vote comes up, it may be that the port citizens will vote you out anyway, even though you captured it for your nation. If you're independent and you take a port, good luck keeping it, honestly. Like, it's going to be tough, intentionally so. You've got the weight of all of these colonial nations on your back. Yeah, you're going to have a lot of money and firepower. In terms of smaller groups, I mentioned fleets. That's like a party, I guess, in a traditional MMO. But fleets are groups of ships. So you could like invite your friend who's a captain of another ship, and then his ship and all of the people in his ship become part of your fleet. And so then you can provide orders to those other captains as the fleet commander. So yeah.
Okay, then guys, if you want to comment on anything, if you want to leave something for Tyler, make sure to write it in now, because I would say we wrap this up in maybe 10 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, 10, 20 minutes maximum, I think.
Yeah. So the last question that I'm seeing here now is, how many cannons does the most powerful ship in the game have?
Oh, you're testing my my ability to think on my feet. I'm not sure. The largest ship we have currently is Phoebus or HMS Pandora. So go and Google search that, and then that will give you your answer. I think it's 14, but I don't want to be wrong. I think it's 14. I'm so bad. My memory's terrible for numbers, so apologies. But yeah, search HMS Pandora 1779, and that will give you the gun numbers.
Another question here is, will I be able to hire AI NPC ships to serve me with trade ships?
AI ships so like if you're a merchant or something, you can have AI ships.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the intention. You'll be able to, they're not necessarily belonging to you, but you can, in theory, provide an AI character with a ship and get them to do a thing for you, and they will have an AI crew. Yeah, that's the intention. That's way later on. That'll be a very, very distant feature, but yeah, that's the intention. 24 guns. Yes, sorry. 24 guns for Pandora. So that's the most guns we have at the moment. That doesn't include swivels, though, I believe.
Okay, then one more important comment here is, what kind of damage, so what kind of visual damage, fire, holes, and stuff like that can we expect from the game?
Yeah, this is a really complicated one. Obviously, being first person, and the ships being, as you can see in the background here, as densely packed and filled with stuff as they are, it can't work like the games that are already out there. Even Sea of Thieves, which is first person, the interiors of these ships are stylistically, they look great, but they are very simplified, right? And you can almost always see the interior walls of every part of the ship, so you can fix the holes like you can in that game. In Ahoy, it's much more difficult because, obviously, like I said, packed with detail, loads of stuff in the way. We can't have things splintering all the time, because it's just from an art perspective, like the amount of work to have like every possible area of the ship have holes in it is insane. But there will be like sort of cosmetic damage in terms of like railings and stuff getting blown apart. The binnacle where your compasses are will get shattered and destroyed. Your rudder could get shot off. Good luck. Masts can get removed. That's all part of the plan. You can put holes in ships that will sink it, but it's a slow process. So, yeah.
Okay, last question, and then I'm thinking we can wrap this up.
Yeah, sure.
So last question is, you said earlier that you should be able to change the loadout on the cannons, but will you be able to have individual loadouts? say you have the main gun deck of 4 PD cannons, but as you capture ships, you transfer cannons of higher caliber and swap them out one by one.
Yeah, it's one by one. So each gun is separate. You can actually name the guns as well. If you've watched Master and Commander, you'll see at the opening scene, each of the guns has a name written on the carriage, so you can name them, and that's how you can know which like gun crew that you're talking about to the players and stuff. So.
Okay, so with this, if nobody has any more questions or comments, I'm just going to wait a little bit, see if
that was a lot, wasn't it? Wow.
If somebody is going to write something else in here. There were also a lot of comments, not only questions, but also a lot of comments, but I'm glad we got through all of them.
Yes, I mean, look, if we don't get your questions answered, there's one thing to be aware of is at the start of the year, I'll be doing an in-person video answering questions and talking about this, literally called the Year in Review. So that will be me answering questions, talking about where we've come from this last year and what the plan is for the next. That's it's in January. So if you've got questions that we don't get to and you'd like me to answer those on camera, then let me know. You can post them in the Discord here or the Ahoy Discord probably would be easier for us to find. And then, we'll try and add them to that list.
Okay, last question here, and then we are going to wrap this up. At what point do you think you will be releasing the game? It seems that you are promising a lot, but surely a lot of this won't be completed within a year or so.
No, so everything we've spoken about the last however many hours, I don't know. It feels like a long time, but it could have been 40 minutes, I don't know.
No, it was a long time. Don't you worry.
Everything I've spoken about in the last few hours has been theoretical, the plan, the design that we're going for. The first experience, later sort of early middle next year, will be very, very simple. It will be focused on sailing and getting the sailing mechanics in with a bit of multiplayer crew in there. There won't be any AI crew yet. It's going to be very bare bones, and that's intentional. We're developing it open with you guys watching as we go. The vision that we've spoken about, that whole sort of persistent open world, that could be 2 years away. It could be 5 years away. We might not ever get there. And I need to make that very clear. If we don't get the support financially from investors that we need to get there, and the original, the early releases that we released don't get the sort of sales that we need, then it simply can't be done. We're presenting the option that we feel is the best game we want to make, and as someone said, investors want to see interest. So if you want to see this game succeed and you want that vision to become a reality, then the best thing you can possibly do, wishlist us on Steam, support us on Patreon if you can, follow us in Discord, Twitter, YouTube, all the rest. I'll drop some links in the chat in a minute. But ultimately we are independent and independently funded by you guys right now. And so we're doing as much as we possibly can, as fast as we possibly can. Yeah, well, that was fun. Honestly, this was great. I really enjoyed that. And some great questions. Made me think on my feet quite a lot. It's a skill I'm slowly developing. But yeah, I'd love to do this again at some point.
Yeah, I would also absolutely love to have you again sometime in the future. So first of all, thank you very much for being here today, having the discussion with the members of the audience, and talking so much about your, I would say, live project.
Yeah.
Given how much work I think you're going to have to put into this, and also the members of your team, of course. So I wish you all the best with this project. I really hope that you succeed, because I also want to play this sometime in the future. And if this was it, then I would say thank you very much, and until next time.
No, thank you very much for having us. And I'd love you guys to have this game to play. It's a long journey. long voyage, I should say, right? And we're all in it together, really. We succeed if you guys succeed in getting the game you want. So, yeah, follow along and fingers crossed we can get there.
Okay, then bye. Until next time.
Yes, thank you very much for having us, guys. Catch you soon.
Thank you all. Bye.